Hello and welcome to the monthly Microsoft licensing update, May 2022 from version 1. My name is Carlo Doherty and I am the principal Microsoft licensing consultant here at version 1. I'm joined on today's call by some of my colleagues from the SAM practice to talk about all things Microsoft licensing. How is everybody today?
Very well,
Good,
thank you.
Carl.
Good. So relatively quiet month this month, I think, on Microsoft product licensing updates. I guess probably a driver behind that is that we're kind of coming towards the end of Microsoft's financial year and fast approaching the conference season, where Microsoft's internal employee conference and partner
Inspire.
conference takes place in July. So no doubt we'll probably have a more interesting updates or meteor updates in the coming couple of months, I would imagine, as is usually the case.
Yeah.
But this month was relatively quiet. So I suppose, first of all, if we look at the first update that was out there, Microsoft 365. William, I know you love all things Microsoft 365, so what's moving and shaking?
Yeah, well, there's two minor updates really. So it's on the Business Suite edition, which is the uh, under 300 user bracket threshold. So the two announcements really affecting organizations running business suites are they've added Business Premium to the as an eligible prerequisite for the remote help in the license prerequisites table. So last month we discussed the widening of the prerequisite table of eligible subscriptions for deploying remote help to the enterprise editions, extended further to the business premium edition. So enterprise grade features coming into the business suite versions. And the second one was just really a term update for Microsoft Defender for Business and the upper threshold limit being enforced of 300 user subscriptions. So again, it impacts Microsoft 365 business editions, just saying that you can't have more than 300 Microsoft Defender for Business users per tenant for that edition. So it's just a minor sort of reinforcement of the terms.
Is that technically gated?
You can have more than 300, but you've got to pay the enterprise SKU. That's the technicality. Is you can have more than 300 users on the business suite editions or the add-ons, but the 301st you've got to pay the nearest enterprise edition price.
Gotcha.
But a fair question.
Yeah. Tricky question early on as well.
Yeah.
I only ask the good ones.
I looked at all things Dynamics and yeah, not a huge amount to report home here on this particular one. And I think it's, really just relevant to organizations that are using the LinkedIn Sales Navigator service to generate leads. And really what we saw here was the inclusion of an updated URL for LinkedIn's DPA or data processing agreement. So if you're a data processing nerd, then there's something to get your teeth into here. But no, nothing really changes as such on the dynamic side of things. I also looked at Azure DevOps, or the artist formerly known as Visual Studio Team Services, which is as an online service that includes like a collection of applications or a collection of tools, should I say, for application lifecycle management. There's a couple of subtle changes here. Some of them are kind of self-explanatory in that, the services for use for development and test purposes only. I think most people would get that at this stage. And then some language around Microsoft being classified as an authorized developer for Apple software that's included with DevOps. And then the third one is kind of on the data processing side of things, and this refers to the access rights that Microsoft have with regards to third-party repository service accounts. So if your organization is, has, stringent controls or concerns around data processing, it's definitely worth having a look at that just to see if there's any hidden gotchas there that you might want to be aware of in terms of third-party access or third-party repository service accounts, or an access to those service accounts, should I say. Um, I also looked at Azure Maps, which is something that I can't say I look at too often. It's something that I haven't come across frequently with organizations that I've worked with in the recent past. There's a couple of key things to call out here. One is on imagery, so it's an interesting one. Imagery within Azure Maps comes from two sources. One is that comes from Bing, and the second one is from Airbus, which is I thought was quite interesting to look at.
Yeah.
Key limitation here orgs need to be aware of, particularly orgs in specific countries, is that Airbus have geographic limitations in terms of where those images can be used from. So if you're from a country that's impacted by that, it's worth familiarizing yourself with the list of countries that are limited geographically from using Airbus imagery. If you don't use Airbus imagery, I'm guessing you'd probably be pointed towards using Bing imagery. And the product terms includes a link to the notices for Bing. So if there's if there's restrictions in there, you probably want to familiarize yourself. But again, this is quite a niche offering for some organizations. Copyright was another thing there, but I think this is kind of self-explanatory. Right? So Microsoft have included some language in around the that organizations don't have the rights or the ability, or shouldn't have the rights, should I say, to mask or remove copyright associated with imagery, and organizations need to take the necessary steps to ensure that images have the right copyright notice associated with them. So again, it's quite a niche one, interesting to read up on all the same. And then the final one on Azure that I looked at was on all things IoT, right? So Microsoft made some announcements there, as you can see, based on the product terms this month. They've removed the from the availability tables the IoT suites offer. That's not to say Microsoft are moving out of the IoT space. When you look at IoT, Microsoft continue to have a large variety of services and software to help monitor, manage, and control IoT devices. So again, not a huge amount to write home about from the elements that I looked at on Azure, but yeah, still some niche gotchas there that some organizations might need to be aware of. So I'm going to turn it over and kind of keep it on the privacy and security term side of things. Richard, I know you get that short straw every month when we look at this on privacy and security. Any insights that you've gleaned from this month's
From
product
the
terms?
Yeah, this month is no different from any other month. I think Microsoft is simply trying to bolster its privacy and protections commitment that they made. I think it was in 2020. So essentially, what they did here was they added the Azure firewall to the Microsoft Azure Core Services section of the Core Online Services table on the privacy and security terms. Right. So essentially, if you track back over the last 18 months to 2 years, you'll notice these changes in the privacy terms and moving certain clauses from where they were existing to where they want them to be now under the Azure core services. I guess also kind of showing the commitment to data protection, privacy protection as well. Yep, but nothing new, nothing major here.
Dave, I haven't heard from you at all in the last
Yeah, my
10
favorite.
minutes or so.
Well, there was an update to SQL Server in this month's product terms. And SQL Server, as you know, Carl, is one of my mastermind subjects.
Never stop
I
learning.
was never stop learning, exactly. But it was interesting in that, it's to do with distributed availability groups and how that is being that use of distributed availability groups has been extended to SQL Standard, but only for database replication on Azure resources. So look, yeah, I mean, probably no surprise, Azure is the only show in town. For Microsoft. It does, I think, bring up like where it could be a really, and it will be a really kind of interesting, further blog post on availability groups in general, because there's a lot around always on availability feature in SQL Server Enterprise, and to look at like just the licensing, I think, of distributed availability groups, and what kind of happens in real life and how that impacts on the licensing. But in a nutshell, anyway, look, the main kind of core change is that SQL Server Standard is allowed, the use of distributed availability groups, but only in Azure. Surprise,
Yeah.
surprise.
I think it's kind of nothing changed there really with SQL Server. It's probably the one Microsoft product that we've seen since probably since 2008 onwards. A constant flow of key product changes, key product licensing changes have taken place. That and the risk is that you have a mix of old and new licensing, and I think some orgs inadvertently often mix old terms with new terms with old terms, and then all of a sudden you're falling outside of Microsoft's licensing terms. So yeah, it's definitely agree. It's probably something we should look at pushing some material
Yeah.
out. Maybe there's another kind of fireside chat like this in the making where we might get down into the detail on some of the newer changes on SQL Server to help.
That's a really good point, because distributed availability groups is only going to be concerned with from SQL Server 2016 on. Like, it doesn't affect, as a feature, to earlier versions of SQL. But I guess, we're now 2022, and as customers move from those legacy SQL 2008 R2 and 2012, and the better ways of kind of load balancing workloads, this is definitely, I think, one to plan for, as regards customers are concerned.
That's good. So anything processing related this month, William? I know you are always
there
knee deep
is.
in all things processing. So what's going on? What's the
Right,
updates?
there's a catchy program agreement supplemental term for Microsoft customer agreements. So this is basically cancellation terms and renewal terms. This is something that's going to really, it's going to need defining and clarifying by Microsoft as it, I think, I perceive it as being slightly confusing. So the online services, so Microsoft 365, etc., with auto renewal, they will automatically renew the day after the subscription term expires. That's fair enough. Unless the customer chooses not to renew by ticking the box saying do not renew, which everyone, that's fair game. If you tick the box, then it's going to auto renew. If you don't tick the box, it won't. So, but the problem here comes that the term now includes the statement at least 30 days before the subscription expires by updating the auto renewal setting. So what does that mean? So if you don't opt out of auto renewing a minimum of 30 days prior to the actual subscription contract renewal date, then does that actually mean it's going to auto renew? So if you do it, yeah. So are they actually, all intents and purposes, saying that the subscription contract renewal date is being brought, the notice of termination is being brought 30 days forward from the actual date of renewal?
Yeah.
So the only exception to this that I can see is that the new extended notice stipulation, which is 168 hours right to cancel grace period after the order date. So it needs clarified. It definitely needs ironing out. I think this 30 days, if you don't tick it before 30 days, then it's going to auto renew. I think it's going to be a bit of a tricky one for people to administer. So it's just one to bear in mind that if your renewal date is 1st of April, it might not actually be. It might be the 1st of March.
So another great reason to invest in FinOps or software asset
management, definitely.
So
and it is those little nuances and technicalities which really it could catch customers out quite heavily, because if they're planning for renewal dates, that might just need to be reviewed and well in advance.
Yeah, well, it could. Yeah, particularly if you've got waste in there and you discover
that you can't actually cancel them, or
that's a pretty bitter pill to swallow, to have to keep using it for 12 months after it's not required
Yeah.
anymore. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting one. I guess it's as we see a lot that wastage is there. Probably compliance is less of an issue, but waste is the enemy now, right? When
Yeah.
it comes to
Yeah.
managing or licensing in the cloud. So I think that pretty much concludes the updates for today's session. Unless anybody else wants to provide any further insights, I think that's pretty much covered us off. As we always say, if you have any Microsoft licensing related questions or any licensing related questions across other vendors for that matter, do feel free to reach out to us here at Version 1. As we do each month with this monthly update, there'll be a supplementary blog on my Medium account, so keep an eye out for that if you're looking for relevant links associated with the updates that we've talked about. In the meantime, if you go to the Microsoft product terms and search for this month's updates for May 2022, you'll be able to see those directly yourself. And thanks again, and we'll see you next month. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.